Thanks, Allie. Well, crowds growing again in Cairo, Egypt this morning. Here's a live look outside a pro-Morsi rally just 4 days after the coup that forced the country's president from power. 30 people were killed yesterday during a series of violent demonstrations there. And Connor Powell is live in Cairo with the very latest on the developments at this hour. Good morning, Connor.
Good morning, Clayton. Well, Egypt is officially not under martial law, but there is a heavy military presence here in Cairo and really across the country. There are a lot of roads that are blocked, bridges that are closed, military troops and vehicles all over the city, all over the country, trying to keep the peace. But already we are hearing that a Coptic Christian was shot dead by a gunman in the Sinai region in sort of the western part of Egypt. Now, we're also hearing that at least 30 people were killed over the violence last night. Hundreds, if not thousands more, were injured as police and military clashed with pro-Morsi, pro-Muslim Brotherhood fighters. At times, it was really primitive fighting with sticks and stones and hand-to-hand combat on many of the streets here. I mean, it was just really violent and intense fighting. That is the level of anger and feeling here in Egypt right now. Both sides are very, very angry at each other. The Muslim Brotherhood is still maintaining a peaceful sit-in protest outside the outside the Republican Guard headquarters, where we believe that President Morsi, former President Morsi, is being held. They are calling on their supporters to take to the streets again tonight and tomorrow and to maintain this protest. Now, we also heard that General Sisi, the top commander here in Egypt, also met with the new interim president, Ali Mansour. What we are not hearing, however, is anyone on the new government meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood leaders. Seems like tensions here are still high and are not going anywhere, Clayton.
And Connor Powell live for us in Cairo this morning with the very latest on the developments there and the violent protests. We'll check back a little bit later in the show. Meanwhile, we want to bring in Governor Mike Huckabee this morning from Little Rock, Arkansas, who's been monitoring the developments in Egypt as well. Governor, great to see you this morning.
Well, happy 4th of July weekend to all of you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Governor. So what should we think of what's happening in Egypt? How does it affect the United States, and what should our policy be?
Well, I think, first of all, we got to re-examine what policy led us here. This is an administration that gave 20 F-16s and 200 Abrams tanks to a president who said the Jews were bloodsuckers and called them the descendants of apes and pigs. We should have demanded an apology, demanded a retraction before we gave military hardware to someone who is that hostile to a neighbor that he has been at peace with, or his country's been at peace with, for the past 35 years. This was really an outrageous thing that our government seemed to just look the other way.
So Governor, now that Morsi is out and we're watching, though, the turmoil and the unrest and the violence there, is this really a good thing for the United States? How do we capitalize on what's happened now?
Well, disruption's never a good thing, but it may be a good thing that the Muslim Brotherhood has been brushed back by the people of Egypt. The people of Egypt are good and wonderful people. For many, many years, they've lived with a version of Islam that was not radical. They lived lives that had Western influence. If they wanted to be very strict Muslims, they certainly were able to do that. But there was also allowance for Christians in Egypt. Under the Muslim Brotherhood, churches have been burned, Christians have been persecuted, even those who do not accept the more radical form of Islam have been really brutalized.
Yeah.
And so the only good thing is that the Muslim Brotherhood has now been exposed for the brutal regime they are, and hopefully they are not going to be back in power.
And Governor, we're just getting word, breaking news into our studio this morning, that a Christian priest in Egypt has been shot and killed. Just now we're learning this here. We'll have more details on that as it emerges in Cairo. As you can see, this is still unfolding at this hour. But I have to get your perspective now, Governor, because we've seen all of these protests. We've seen signs anti-Obama, and they've been linking President Obama and the Obama administration to the Islamist regime, to the Muslim Brotherhood, seen as being too cozy with the Muslim Brotherhood. How in the world did that happen?
I think it happened because of the naivete of this president who went to Cairo a few years ago and honestly believed that he was so persuasive that he could charm the snake back into the basket. And clearly he can't. He's dealing with something that is not going to be resolved by rhetoric, even his brilliant and lofty rhetoric. And this is a president who has got to understand that we face a very serious threat in jihad. And jihad breeds terrorism all over the world. It creates Hezbollah, Hamas. These are not people who want to sit down, drink tea, and make nice with us. These are people who want to kill us. They want to kill every last one of us. And they want to kill the other Muslims who do not agree with their radical version of it. So until this president understands that this is a serious, a clear and present danger to every living being on the planet Earth, then I think we're going to continue to see an administration making huge foreign policy mistakes.
I wonder if it's not time to reorient the lens through which we see foreign policy itself. So up until right now, one of the criteria that we look for in deciding whether or not to support another country is the government democratically elected? This was what the Bush administration argued when we pushed for elections in Gaza, for example, with terrible results. Shouldn't we evaluate other countries purely in terms of whether they're nice to the United States, whether their existence helps the United States? Shouldn't our foreign policy be about helping our own country first and foremost?
You know, we've really had a schizophrenic foreign policy anyway. We say that we want them to be democratically elected. Then why have we been such good friends with Saudi Arabia? Do you see any signs of democracy there?
Exactly.
I don't, you know, zero. So we've had a completely inconsistent foreign policy, not just with Obama. Let's be fair. Republicans have played the same game, but what we need to do is to realize that the purpose of the American government is to serve America and its people and its interest. It is not to placate, and it is not to somehow try to believe that it's going to be loved by everybody else in the world. In fact, right now, I don't ever remember a time when we've been held in more contempt around the world. When you have the French foreign minister dressing down the ambassador at a 4th of July party over spying in public, this is not exactly what I call prime time for the United States image.
Governor, very quickly, you think that we keep our $1 billion+ flowing to Egypt now?
I think we let them know that it's going to be conditioned upon whether they're going to be tolerant of the Christians in Egypt and other Muslims, the secular side of Egypt. If not, then why should we continue to give them money? I know the rationale is, yeah, we've got to keep them on our good side. What good side? I don't see the good side coming on here. I see riots in the streets and people getting killed and rights being crushed and women being treated like personal property.
Well, to your point about being fair and kind to Christians, we just, again, if you're just waking up, we just heard reported here into our Fox newsroom a Christian pastor shot and killed in these protests. Governor Huckabee is with us this morning. We're going to carry the governor over and talk more about him, about some of the other big stories